if Pauline came to me and she said, hey, I really do not want to eat meat like she is saying right now. And if I truly care about her, how messed up is it if I'm coming in front of her face and be like, here, I made this burger for you, eat it. And I'm like putting in her face, don't it smell good? Like, that's some childish behavior. Like, you like this. If you're dating somebody and they're constantly trying to tempt you to break the boundary you have, break up with them. What's up, fam? Welcome back to our channel. My name is Tim. This is my beautiful wife, Pauline, and you're tuning in to another episode of the W Podcast, where you get wisdom in the word with the
Wheelers.
Hey, how you doing? You good? You know what's funny? The wisdom in the word thing, I don't even know how we started saying it, but it's clearly stuck for us. I don't know if it's stuck for them, but it just flows.
It's kind of clever.
It flows for us.
I like the alliteration. Wheeler, wisdom, word, all that.
What is it?
Word, wisdom in a word. Wheelers.
There you go.
Well, okay. We say wheelers twice. You say it, I say it once. You say it. That's what I was going off of. But it doesn't matter. But I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm Gucci. We got a really interesting topic today. And it's more so a thought that I had, because we get questions all the time from people. And it's not always the same situation, and we've been in it ourselves when we were dating. Of what do you do when you're dating somebody who has different boundaries than you do? Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, that can be sexual, but that doesn't just have to be sexual, because a boundary can be anything.
Right.
Like right now, you're going through this whole food kick. Not food kick. I know that sounds. I'm not trying to be patronizing, but like you're trying to be intentional with what you're eating, and like that's a boundary that you have. Just like I have a boundary with what I'm eating as well right now.
I never thought about it like that.
And I have to respect your boundary, and you have to respect mine, and we got to maintain that. So it's not just sexual, but a lot of what we're going to talk about today is going to focus around sexual, because that does have a big impact, or a bigger impact, when you are dating. Especially when it comes to sin and relationship with God and shame and all the other things that come with that.
Yeah, I mean, I've never thought about it like that, but it's so true. Because I have thought ever since I changed my diet, which has only been a week, y'all, so pray for me. I'm trying to be, my aim and my goal is to be whole food and plant-based. I'm trying it out for a couple of months just to see the results of it. But everybody around me is eating meat and eating dairy and eating things that I used to love and enjoy, ice cream and things like that. The good thing is there's a lot of non-dairy ice cream options, but that's still not helping me with other goals. Anyway, I have had that thought of like, wow, it's so much easier to stay on your meal plan, diet, whatever you want to call it, when your partner is also eating that. And I don't know about y'all, but I watch a lot of shows on TLC, a lot of these lifestyle shows, and one of them does talk about how much harder it is to lose weight when the people in your household are eating junk around you. And
you say I'm eating junk right now?
I'm just saying, I'm not the one who brought home the Oreo Thins the other day.
Wow.
And I was not strong. I was not strong.
It's funny because I used to tell you this a few years ago when I wanted you to
I
do some
believed
things.
you.
No, you didn't.
Yes, I did. I did. I just didn't care enough that I was like, it's good for you, but I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And clearly you're having your own kind of instance with that. But all that to say, it so much applies with every area of your life. That's just, just shows the power of community and friendship, and who is close to you, how much it's easier to lose weight, to work out, or to do the reverse of those things when you're hanging out with people. Bad company comes good character, which means that good company encourages good behavior, good character and habits and all those things. And it definitely applies, of course, with who you're dating, and how much more so someone you're so like emotionally intimate and vulnerable with. So it's definitely an important kind of thought. But because you also have on the other side of that, this kind of resistance of I'm my own person. I'm an individual. Just because you're doing something doesn't mean I have to do it. Or the spiritual side of that is God didn't convict me of that. Like that's your thing. That's your problem. That's your sin. I don't have that same problem. So why should I have to do what you're doing?
And it's tough in dating because depending on how soon the boundary comes up in the relationship, that can be potentially the first big problem you have in your relationship, at least in a discussion form where everything was going great in a relationship. Y'all love the same movies, y'all love the same food, so you love the same whatever, and then all of a sudden this boundary that you have or that they have comes up, that the chemistry or the flow or the good feels automatically come to a halt or a standstill.
Yeah.
Because there's this new obstacle that you guys have to figure out, especially in the dating sense. Because like with us, like we together, and it is what it is, no matter what comes up.
Aww.
But when you're dating, you can dip. You can take another look and be like, you know what? I don't like the direction that you're going. And it's not, like we said, always sinful. Yeah. Sometimes it's just, I just don't want to do that, or I don't like how you go about that, or I view this differently, and you have to make the tough decision. Do I want to start over? I think that's why so many people stay in bad relationships, because it's like, I just don't feel like starting over. Like, they may know this person really ain't the best option.
Right.
But I ain't really trying to have to... Because there is something comforting about being with somebody, and we're way off our notes here, but there's something very comforting about being with somebody who already knows all the weird things about you. Like, that would be hard for me if I had to start dating again. Like, I am fully myself around you, the good, the bad, the ugly.
There's no ugly parts of you.
Isn't that sweet?
I know.
But
there are bad parts.
Like, having to build that trust up with somebody else, I don't feel like doing all that.
I remember I saw a comment a while ago on one of our Instagram posts. It was like, oh, it's the biggest challenge in dating, and someone was like, though, what's your favorite color part? Yeah. I just go through the whole like, so what do you do? So how long you been saying? Like, just the whole kind of like, I guess the small talk of it all. Because I mean, deep down, everybody hates small talk. I don't care if you're extrovert, introvert. It doesn't matter if you're good at it. Especially by the time you're an adult, you've had this kind of automated conversations of like, how are you? What do you do? Oh, how'd you get into it? How long have you been doing it? Like, nobody likes small talk because I think it's just kind of the fluff of things. You just want to get right to the meat. And so I also hate asking people like, how are you? It's more of like, oh, how's your day going? Anyway. But yeah, people hate that. They hate that part, hate starting over. And yeah, of course people stay in relationships that they should not be in because of that. But I also think in dating, when it comes to boundaries being different on all fronts, it's hard to really know because most people, like, okay, we've been married for 6 years, right? Which we're still very new in the dating or the married kind of game. You know, there are people out here who've been married. Well, my aunt's been married for 60 years, and which is incredible, and like goals, right? We're not there. We're 1/10 of that. But when it comes to dating, most people, what are you dating? Maybe like 2, 3, 4, maybe some people 5 years, depending on your situation, which is, yeah, that's a long time. Most people, I think it's like average of like 2 years.
That's a whole nother episode right there.
That's an average of like 2 years. And a lot of people are on the shorter end of that, you know, in the Christian space of like 1 year. So how much time are you really spending with someone to even go through other boundaries? Like you said, boundaries change and people's expectations and needs change. But are you with someone long enough in the dating period to even have an opportunity to see that change?
Yeah. No, that's a good point. So one of the things when this topic comes up with people is, and we had a similar situation where there's one person who wants to do something or doesn't want to do something or doesn't feel good about a boundary, or has a boundary about something they don't feel good about, and they feel strongly about it, but because the person that they're with feels the complete opposite way about it, there's this tension of, do I stand my ground
Yeah.
Or do I capitulate to what they want? And
I know our first argument.
And I know we had that situation when we were dating. Some of you who've been listening since day one probably remember we've told the story about how I wanted to kiss my girlfriend. I felt that was my right.
Right.
As a boyfriend. What boyfriend doesn't kiss their girlfriend? Like, that's how I felt. Now, granted, when we first started dating, I was only saved for about a year plus, year-ish, year and a half. So I was still very young in my faith, still coming out of the worldly ways. You had been saved maybe, 3 years at that point? Mm-hmm. And you had already decided in your heart that I'm not going to kiss another man till I'm at the altar. Wasn't that what I
sounded like when I...
Was that your stance?
Did I sound like that?
I don't remember. That was a long time ago.
Okay, you guys cop out.
We started dating 9 years ago, so
Praise
that's
God.
not a long time to some people, but to me, that's like, yeah, we've been together for a little bit. So
the longest Christian you've ever been.
That is true. Praise God. So you were.
I got you, y'all.
All right, that's true. So you had that thought and that feeling when I came to you. And I was like, "That's cute that you." That's not what I said. That's not what I said. But
you laughed at me.
That's kind of what I felt like. That's cute, but that's not going to happen here. How did you feel? How did you just feel?
I felt stupid. I felt dumb. Yeah.
Why did you feel dumb?
Because it's very vulnerable to share boundaries with someone. I think that's what what's the guy's name? The hierarchy of needs. Whoever created the hierarchy of needs. I think that, and my psych people correct me in the comments, but I think that's one of the things on there is, like the most vulnerable thing that you can share with somebody is your needs. This is what I need from you. It's very vulnerable to, even admit that you need something. People can talk about their wants and even their dreams a little bit easier than, their needs, especially when it comes to relationships, and just having that sense of awareness of like, yes, this is what I need in a relationship. I need to feel respected and trusted and all those things. So yeah, I felt very kind of just dumb because I knew that it was something that I had decided, and I had obviously been in a relationship before you, and I had kissed, and I felt like, okay, I knew this was a countercultural decision or stance to make, and even at my job afterwards, and I told people Tim and I don't really kiss, or we haven't kissed in a long time. People were kind of like, what type of relationship is that? Are you guys 10 years old, holding hands, supervised by mommy and daddy type of thing? At that point I had grown in my confidence, in my decisions, and
don't let other people put you down for the boundaries you have that you need to help you continue to walk in.
Especially if they're not Christians. Yeah, if they're not, and my coworkers were not. But anyway, yeah, I felt very dumb, very okay, yeah, this is what I have decided is best for me, and you were kind of like, oh, tell me more about that, or why did you come to that decision, or something like that.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
So yeah, I didn't feel good about it. I didn't go home and cry or was like, oh, this isn't the guy for me, because I felt like, okay, I can see a lot of guys being confused or having just a differing stance on that, and I kind of felt like the people pleaser in me came out a little bit as well, or a lot of it, where it's like, okay, I stated what I wanted or what I felt was best, and he disagreed, so one of us is going to have to fold. And I'm glad we ended up kissing for the amount of time that we did, because I think that it showed you and myself and everybody that in the beginning I was right.
Yeah,
not that was my heart in making the decision and kind of going back on it, but I'm glad that it happened.
For us, you definitely were right, and I know people have different views on kissing, and this episode is not about kissing, but that's just our story. And for us, it was too much because we weren't just doing pecks; we was kissing for real out here. And I think what I wish and how I wish I would have handled that situation is a lot different now than it was when I was 21 at the time. Just obviously way more mature. At least I hope so. And it definitely was wrong in the sense of me. I definitely was like belittling your feelings or your desires.
Were you surprised that I wanted that?
Yeah, it definitely caught me off guard. I was not expecting that because we were very on the same page. Like, we ain't having sex. Like, that was not a question. But it never even crossed my mind that someone would not want to kiss who was Christian. Again, I had just started.
I didn't know Christians did that.
No, but I had just really. I wasn't saved for that long, so it makes sense. Now, obviously, you ended up staying with me, even though I had a different boundary than you. But how do you think you would handle that as a 31-year-old woman versus a 22-year-old woman that you were at the time? How do you think you would have handled someone having such a strong difference in boundary and opinion from you? Do you think you would have made different decisions?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like if that would have happened now, I would have most likely given your response a lot more weight than I did back then. I think I was way great.
What does that mean?
More gracious as a 22-year-old. Because I think that if I had told a guy now, like, yeah, I'm not kissing until my wedding day, it's a boundary that I have, and I would have happily explained, like, hey, this is how I came to this decision. This is my past. When I kissed in the past, it led me to places that I didn't want to be, and I'm not saying that, I understand why people kiss, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it in and of itself, but for me, it does not work. And I need to be with somebody who will respect that, whether they agree or not. And you were not disrespectful, like, oh, you're a prude, like, no one's gonna marry you. Like, it wasn't anything like, wow, this girl's off her rocker, like, I'm like, there's something wrong with her. I think you just were surprised. But I think that now I probably would have been more interested and asked you more questions about your stance instead of just being like, oh, well, this is what I've always done. Isn't this what all people do for a relationship? Like, if you had given me some type of like solid, weightier response of like, hey, I want to kiss because of this reason. Because I've heard people say like, I need to know kind of like what our chemistry is like. I need to know what our physical connection is like, and no, we cannot have sex, no, we cannot do all of these things, that other people do. What we have is kissing, and I believe that kissing can be controlled, that there's boundaries within the kissing, like, we're not going to be in certain places, we're not going to be laying down kissing, we're not going to be, our hands are going to be going all over the place. I think that when you have a lot of thought and intentionality behind it, I can respect that. But just to say like, oh, we're going to kiss, everybody kisses, it's like, that's not a good reason.
I don't like
that's
that.
That's following kind of the world's mindset of like, oh, just doing what culture does versus like, no, this is something that I've prayed about. This is something that I've, kind of researched and I've talked to the Lord about. And I do have experience kissing.
Lord, I just need that chemistry, Lord.
I don't know.
Help me kiss.
But if people have like decent reasons for it and like can do it in a way where it's a blessing to their relationship and not a curse, not something that's, basically becoming a distraction for them, which it was, for us. And I can respect that. But yeah, I think that I would have asked more questions now about like, kind of like, not a debate, but like, closing arguments, like in a courtroom, like, okay, this is your side, my side, explain and then deliberate versus like, this is what I want to do. Oh, you don't agree? Fine. Like,
yeah. And we're not saying that it should be an automatic deal breaker if somebody has a different boundary or perspective.
Well, it's going to come up. There's no way the person that you're dating has the exact same boundaries as you. There's no way. It's impossible.
We're not saying that it's a deal breaker. What we're saying, like Pauline mentioned, is it should lead to a discussion.
Yeah.
And then through those discussions, you can decide if it's a deal breaker or not. Because we would suggest, and we've said it in the past, go with the person who has the stronger boundaries, especially when it's around something that could lead you into sin or temptation. It's just safer to go with the stricter boundaries. It's not worth it. Now, if that's not a decision you want to make, we're all grown. And you got to make a decision for yourself. If the person you're with doesn't want to go with the direction you want to go with the boundary, you got to decide, is this person worth me potentially falling into temptation or falling into sin? Because at the end of the day, that's low-key what the decision is. Am I going to be with this person knowing that they don't agree with my boundary and could potentially push my limits?
Yeah.
Am I okay with having to face that temptation? Or is this just not worth it? Because the Bible tells us to count the cost. And I don't think we think about relationships a lot when we think about counting the cost. But essentially, when Jesus was talking about that, because he's the one that said it in Luke 14:28, but don't begin until you count the cost. For who would begin construction of a building without first calculating the cost to see if there was enough money to finish it? And his whole premise in that, and you go read it for yourself, was essentially at the end, he said, you cannot become my disciple without giving up everything you own. And sometimes we don't think about, we have to give up our own desires sometimes in order to really be able to follow Jesus in the way that he's called us to. So we're not saying that that person is bad or that person is sinful if they have a different boundary than you, depending on what it is. But if you know it's going to trip you up, nobody knows you better than you. If I know if I put myself in this situation, I'm going to get messed up. That's like an alcoholic saying, or a recovering alcoholic who hasn't drunk in years says, I'm strong enough now where I'm going to go sit in that bar. It's just
the environment.
It's stupid. Mm-hmm. Why put yourself in that situation if you know that is an environment where you're not going to thrive? So if you're in a relationship and you don't want to be in a house alone with somebody, but they live alone and they're not rocking with that, you got to decide. Is it worth being with this person where I could be smart? Like, just be honest. Like, is it really realistic that somebody wants and doesn't care about not being alone, and you're never going to end up in that situation with them, even if it's by accident?
Yeah, I mean, nobody has sex accidentally with their friends and their parents, on the couch with them. Like, that just does not happen.
Yeah.
But it does always happen when people are alone or have an opportunity to be alone, whether in a room or in a home or whatever. So you have to just be a lot of times like overly pragmatic with stuff. And like, I think the reason why this conversation has gone more towards physical boundaries versus like other boundaries, like emotional boundaries. So, for example, I thought about boundaries when it comes to friendships, especially friendships of the opposite sex, because that's also a very kind of challenging topic when it comes to differing opinions and differing boundaries, where like, oh, the guy has no problem having, two girl best friends that he's texting all day long in a group chat or whatever, and his girlfriend's uncomfortable with that. But then, the girlfriend says, hey, I'm really not cool with you texting them all day long. It's not really about you can't be friends with them. It's just more about like a boundary of how late you're texting them, how often, like who do you tell things first to, that type of thing. And he may say like, I don't understand, but I respect you, and I respect, this boundary that you have of like, how close other females are to a guy that you're dating. And because she may, the girlfriend may not have, she may have guy friends as well, but it's like, hey, I don't ever text them past X, Y, and Z time or whatever. And it's not impeding that boundary on another person, but the reason why physical and sexual boundaries are so much, cause a lot of problems in relationships is because you can't you can't enforce the boundary by yourself. Like, the other person is involved. So, for example, for us, if I had said, hey, I'm not going to kiss anybody until my wedding day, that's very easy to say and do when you are single and you have no options. And like, that was very true for me, how I felt like, okay, like, yeah, I can do this until I got into a relationship. And same thing for you. So if you were like, oh yeah, like I respect your boundary, but I'm gonna kiss, you can't do that without me, without disrespecting our relationship.
Right. Versus
if it's something like food or friends or whatever, it's like, hey, that's your boundary, you're not gonna eat me, I respect that, but don't say anything about me chowing down this burger, and that's fine, because we don't have to eat the same things. But when it comes to physical stuff, you cannot do one, you have to be united on the boundaries, because you guys need each other to go further.
Yeah, and when it's not physical, like you said, or something that could lead to sin, and it's just really a personality trait maybe, or a lifestyle decision, you don't even necessarily have to agree on those things, but you do have to be okay in yourself. If this person never changed, am I okay with that? Because I think we get in trouble a lot of times in these gray area situations that aren't there's not a clear, definitive answer on what is the best decision or what is the most godly decision. It's just, a personal decision that somebody can choose for their life. I think sometimes we think that, we can change them. So if somebody says, I don't want to have kids, we think, they're just saying that because they're 30. By the time they're 37, like, they'll want to have kids. It's like, no, like, if they never change their mind, are you going to be okay marrying that person? And I think sometimes it's hard for us to really get there and asking ourselves those questions, because sometimes it may be out of ignorance. We may not even think to ask those questions. Mm-hmm. Or sometimes it may be out of fear, because we're like, look, I don't want to lose out on this person because they are a great catch everywhere else. It's just this one thing that you can kind of convince yourself it's minor. Mm-hmm. It's not that big a deal, but you don't realize that marriage is an amplifier. So it may not be a big deal right now because...
And a magnifier, yeah.
Really, you're not going to be having kids when you're dating, most likely, if you're trying to live for God. But when you get married, there is an opportunity to have children, and now this little small problem where this was the only thing that was wrong with the person is going to be amplified, because now it's going to be front and center, and you're going to have to deal with it in a way that you didn't have to deal with it before you said I do. And I think sometimes we have to be mindful, and this is why it's good to date in community, because you can have somebody check you and ask you, like, yo, for real, if they don't want to have a child, are you going to be okay with that? And like force you to sit there and think about it, instead of you just sitting by yourself dating in a silo where we can easily talk ourselves or convince ourselves out of anything, if we're being honest. That's why a lot of us haven't lost weight yet, because we can convince ourselves that we ain't that big yet, or it ain't that bad. You see what I'm saying? You understand?
I do.
So one of the things I also wanted to touch on is making sure we don't think we're more spiritually strong than we are. Mm-hmm. And one of the things we live by that we were taught is we're not that holy. Yeah. And I think sometimes we think, well, I'm strong enough to handle a certain boundary.
Yeah.
I can watch a movie with a bunch of nude scenes. I'm strong enough not to lust. And it's like...
And I think that's such a good example to bring up, because like one of the most powerful things I heard, and this is from like a parenting perspective, parenting boys, and luckily our kids are not old enough to have these challenges yet, but when it comes to and I'm allowed to say that on
YouTube. You done said it now.
When it comes to like...
You know what she just said. When it come to that,
yeah,
we ain't trying to get kicked off the internet.
Are you gonna?
Well, just go.
Yeah, when it comes to just seeing images that are harmful to our minds and our spirits, and things obviously pop up. And when we were growing up, nobody had MacBooks and all that stuff, all this protected stuff, but like things would pop up, and like this one mom that I was listening to who has sons was saying, something that popped up on her son's computer when he was doing homework, and she had said to him, she saw what it was and like shut it down, and instead of like yelling at him and saying like, oh, what are you doing looking at that, you shouldn't be looking at that type of thing, and that can often bring shame, she said, I'm so sorry that you had to see that. Even whether he did it on purpose or not, she didn't know, but that wasn't the point. The point was like, that's not something that was for you, and that's not something that you should, that I know it's harmful towards you. It's not, and kind of assuming the best of him, and just the same thing as if like your child were to fall and get hurt, like was it their fault? Like most likely, but also you're just so sad as a parent that they're hurt and that they're bleeding or whatever. And I loved that, because I feel like so many times when it comes to, these kind of perspectives and like us feeling like, okay, we are put in these situations where we're combating these certain sins. I forgot my train of thought.
No, but I think you bring up a good point about...
I forgot what I was going to say.
You forgot what you were going to say?
Yeah.
That's all right. It'll come back to you. But one of the things I wanted to just highlight, because sometimes somebody's going to have a different boundary than you, and it may not be something that's a deal breaker, or you may have a different boundary than somebody, and it may not be a deal breaker. One of the things you have to be mindful of, and one of the things you want to make sure you don't do, is once you all have a conversation and decide this is the boundary that you have, I'm going to honor that in this dating relationship. If you're dating somebody and they're constantly trying to tempt you to break the boundary you have, break up with them. Like, it is not worth it, because you're now putting yourself, they're showing you character.
Yeah.
Right there. Because if Pauline came to me and she said, hey, I really do not want to eat meat like she is saying right now, and if I truly care about her, how messed up is it if I'm coming in front of her face and be like, here, I made this burger for you, eat it. And I'm like putting in her face, don't it smell good? Like, that's some childish behavior. Like, you like this. Or if we want to go sexual and you're dating somebody and you're like, hey, I do not want to kiss before marriage. And they're constantly up in your face, breathing down your neck, getting close to your ear, whispering in your ear, kissing on your neck. Like, they're doing things to try to tempt you to do something that you already told them clearly you don't want to do. That's someone you would want to run from.
I mean, that's honestly what the devil does. It's like, oh, you got to go. I'm going to try to do everything I can to get you away from it and pull you away from it. So that's not somebody you want to be with at all. And honestly, a lot of times people who act like that, it's from their own place of insecurity, feeling like they're not secure enough in their own relationship with God, or they're feeling like, oh, because people will say that to you, like when you get saved or, in a relationship, of like, oh, you think you're better than me, or oh, you think you're holier than me, like that you don't kiss or you don't do this or you can't have sex anymore because you think you're better than everybody else. And it's like, no, it's not about you. It's about me knowing how I was, how I can be, and how damaging and how horrible that side of me is. And I'm not trying to increase myself. I'm trying to decrease myself and increase God.
Yeah.
And whatever I can do, by the power of the Holy Spirit to increase the Lord in my life is what I'm going to do. So it's not really about, and like, if you're offended by that, if you're offended by, my decisions to pursue holiness, like, I'm sorry, but maybe that's the Lord kind of telling you and like tapping you in the shoulder, like, hey, I have some changes that I would like for you to make as well. Yeah,
because if you always want to toe the sin line of how close can I get, eventually you're going to trip over and you're going to fall. So that's why you want to be mindful of people who are causing you to get close to a line you never wanted to be with.
Yeah, and even people who don't respect your boundaries, I mean, friends, family, whatever, and like any area of your life, finances, your health, your academics, your career, whatever, a lot of times it's because they don't, number one, we don't usually take the time to explain fully to them why we're making the decisions that we're making, or they're not listening and they, again, are insecure about their own lives and their own decisions, that they cannot respect you and therefore definitely can't be happy for you, because just people are just selfish deep down. We all have our moments of that, so just be gracious to those people. But yeah, you definitely don't need to be in a relationship with somebody who's, let's say if you come to them and and say like, hey, I'm trying to lose weight, the doctor told me that I am gonna die if I don't lose this weight, and then they're like, oh really, well, I'm gonna make it hard for you to lose this weight. And it's like, what type of friend are you? I just told you that this is like a life or death situation, and we have to look at our spiritual lives in the same way. Like, this is a life or death situation. Like, this is, I am dead to sin, I'm alive in Christ. Like, I don't put myself in situations to bring out the old me. That old me is dead and gone. Now I'm alive in Christ, and I make decisions that he tells me to make and that are aligned with his word and his heart and his character. And if that person doesn't understand that just shows you right there that they don't make decisions in the same way, whatever that is. And that's why I said it's, the conversation piece is so big, because there are plenty of godly people that we know have, seemingly good marriages that, they kissed while they were dating and it wasn't a huge problem for them. And like, that's great. Like, more power to you. But at the end of the day, it's all about, the conversation, and it's all about the why behind it. So it's not about the actual boundary, itself. There are plenty of couples, there are people who were alone in the house together and it was fine. And, but that's why you also have to take into account what your own personal past is. Because there are people who got in relationships and they were saved. It was their first relationship and they didn't have a sexual past. They had no temptation. They had no, I'm not saying no temptation, but they didn't have to unlearn as much as people like, you and I did. So everyone's situation is different and there's that disclaimer out there as well. But yeah, you just want to, if someone's not respecting your boundaries, and I know that there are girls who like kind of test guys and like kind of see how they respond, like, oh yeah, I'm not gonna kiss, or oh yeah, like you can't walk me to the door, or whatever the case is, and like see how the guy responds. And if it's like, oh, you're gonna keep pushing me to do something I told you I don't want to do, that's disrespectful. I'm good, I'm out.
Yeah, for sure. So if you're somebody who has strong boundaries or has boundaries that are unique or different from the mass majority of people out there, please be encouraged that that's okay, that you're actually doing the right thing, because the Bible says it's a narrow road.
And it also says to live set apart, so you shouldn't be doing what everybody else is doing. It's
not going to be a lot of people. It shouldn't be a lot of people doing what you're going to do if you really are trying to live for Christ. And you got to remember, like, this is not going to sound good or feel good, but it's the truth. Living for Jesus means that sometimes we have to say no to our own desires. A lot of times that's not going to be about relationships, but sometimes it may be about saying no to somebody who really isn't going to help you reach all that God has for you. And the good thing about that is knowing that all things work together for your good. So whether that means you'll be in another relationship or not, God's got you and he's going to be with you because you're trying to live for him and honor him, and he's going to order your steps. So be encouraged that your boundaries are your boundaries, and they are not bad. They are not wrong. You're not weird. You're trying to protect yourself and keep yourself, and in the end, you're going to win because of that. So this has been another episode of the W Podcast. We'll see y'all next week.
Bye.
Thanks for watching this video.
To get more Christian relationship advice, subscribe to our channel.
And make sure you check out our other videos as well.